Okay, okay, good. Good evening, boys and girls. How are we all doing today? Excellent, excellent. That is lovely to hear. I love that. I love that so much. I'm sorry, I can't really repeat what was just said to me. It's suffice it to say, it's really not appropriate for a stream like ours. Well, regardless, we're here to have some fun today, right? Yeah. you know, if you guys like, never mind. I don't even want to talk about it. Anyway, so today we're going to do two things. We're going to do our military operations question, and we're going to do our Squirrels at War segment. And may I just say, it's wonderfully serendipitous that both our external sponsor and the sponsor in the private club. Oh, well, hi, my friend. A sidewinder, my friend. Welcome. And yeah, if you need to go put the kids to bed, I mean, don't let me stop you from doing that. But I'm glad that you're here with us, even in the middle of, I guess, with that connection. But yeah, so today we're doing both the what am I saying? Oh my god. We're doing the military operations question, and then we're also going to continue our Squirrels at War story. So you're right, I wasn't talking to you. Excellent. I'm so glad you understood that. Yeah, I'm very happy for you too. Okay. No. We're just gonna get started. So let's. Okay. So let's talk real quick about what's happening here. Right. This is our 1870s. I should change that. Let's just change that real quick. Where is that? Oh, it's here. Okay, I can just go away. There we go. Excellent. Okay, lock that. Alright, so we're back in 1870s, and today we're really talking about this initial attack in the 1870s between a gray force, in the southwest, and a blue and red coalition in the northeast. City A is a major, riverside city of blue, and so there's going to need to be some amount of defense in here. So to me, actually, this question is fairly simple, because if we may just pull up this to demonstrate, essentially what this means is that this line here up to about here, why is it there? That line is not crossable for an army, right? That's about a 246. That's a 60-meter gap within a few tens of meters. So there's not going to be much movement down that for big armies. So this bridge is fairly safe. There's another gap that's uncrossable, that's about here, which means that really the only places that the black army can move into is the central area. And so, good point. Let me turn this into 4. That's better. Yeah, thanks for calling that out. There we go. So these are essentially two barriers that are our blue's natural defense lines. And so the goal is to not allow black to gain the eastern shore, right? And of course, then secondary goal is to keep as much of your population as safe as possible. And so right off the bat, we can say for certain that this town in the northeast is not going to be viable. We cannot defend that. This town in the middle of nowhere, we cannot defend. Like, these three are very, very difficult for us to defend. So unfortunately, we will not. But what we can do is we can, and I will continue to use this, except this time we will use, what's going on? Except this time we will use 3, and then we will use 2. What we can do is we can sort of create a defensive line here, 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 and here, right? And so what this allows us to do is essentially pull, because we have 2 pieces of artillery that are able to essentially back us up in case of any push through, and we have enough infantry to do sort of defensive movements. We can ideally defend this area, and this area, right? Does that kind of make sense? Exactly. Yes, that's basically exactly it. The idea is that we are able to defend this because we can use the towns as readouts, and with the towns, like in this day and age, we didn't really have much town-to-town fighting, just because armies were so small in comparison to the towns that, at least in my view, that's why they didn't. There was also probably some romanticism and like do not involve civilians, that type of thing going on, that town to town, like in town fighting, was simply not the norm. That's not to say it didn't happen. Of course, we have a bunch of, actually I had a bunch of examples that I can pull up if we really need to. Let me know if you guys want it. I would have to like look through my archives for it, but it's not that difficult. But if you take my word for it, essentially there's no fighting in the town, so you can use the towns as readouts. Redoubt, REDOUBT, right? And you can use the towns as that, and essentially mobile fortresses. You could essentially prevent anyone from marching into here, right? And so this is 2.5 kilometers, which means each square is 5 kilometers. That's not a very big distance, right? You can hold that with 2 infantry divisions, at least until reinforcements arrive. We're not saying you hold them indefinitely, but definitely you should be able to until reinforcements arrive. So the reason why I have this open is because I wanted to draw some arrows. Oh yeah, that's a good point. Why am I not using these? Good question. A question I wish I had an answer to, but I don't. So shush, my boys. We're going to set that width to maybe like 3. Excellent. So essentially what we're going to say is we're going to have a retreat into these defensive lines. This one's a little smaller, right? We're going to have to retreat into here. But one thing that we will have, and that is of very importance, is this. And it is the there we go. And it is for the red infantry to get to this bridge as quickly as possible. And there's good reason, because because essentially what we want to do is we want to create a bridgehead on this side, because we know that what black will do is something like this, right? Like the dragoons will definitely be aiming at the bridge as quickly as they can, get across it, and once they're across and this is invested, then their reinforcements and their excessive formations, perhaps even the rest of their own dragoons, can come across to the eastern shore. And we cannot allow that, because once they're on the eastern shore and they've fortified the eastern shore, it becomes a much more difficult proposition, because then they can either cut off the bridges, cut off the river, whatever, and things over here might be interesting. So we don't want that. No, not at all. And so what we need to look for is, how can we get around this, right? Like how can we make sure that this doesn't happen? Well, luckily for us, the red cavalry are heavy cavalry versus the gray cavalry, with black cavalry, which are themselves dragoons. For those who are not well versed in the difference, heavy cavalry are melee cavalry, which means that they're very good at a charge. They rely on short range weapons to really cut down enemy infantry formations. Whereas dragoons are essentially riflemen on horseback, right? And I'm sure everyone will have heard the word carbine before. The difference between a carbine and a rifle actually comes from this era where, or quasi this era, let's say, where dragoons, because they needed rifles that worked on horseback, not just dragoons, but everyone with a gun that wanted a gun on horseback would use carbines, because they were shorter, because rifles were too long and therefore too unwieldy when you're trying to fight from horseback. That's really all there is to it. So they're essentially what these dragoons end up being are they're essentially slightly crappier infantry, but that have a much better strategic and operational speed, right? And that's important though, right? Because if you think about it, being able to move your infantry to a position where your enemy does not expect it is incredibly powerful at a time like this in the 1870s, late 1800s, early Victorian era, because early-ish Victorian era, because that is how you perform these very powerful concentric attacks, where the enemy is attacked from all sides, and therefore, they're essentially surrounded and broken apart from all sides. And yes, exactly. That's the inspiration for the Black Force is exactly that. And in World War II, they really did practice that to perfection, because they were it's not that their tanks were better. In fact, I think there's no arguing that actually, especially once the Eastern Front started, that their tanks were actually inferior to their opponents. I'm not gonna argue that. Just don't argue with me about that. I don't care about machine statistics. No, they were just inferior because they were designed in the 1930s, early 1930s, late 1920s, and their enemy tanks were designed in the late 1930s based on their own experience, right? Like there was a research and development agreement between the Germans and the Soviets that actually led in part to the development of the T-34, which is why it was considered one of the best tanks actually in World War II, because it really, like, it took a lot of I used whatever. It took a lot of knowledge that the Germans had built up and incorporated it in. I'm not saying they copied anything, no, but rather that it got incorporated in a very holistic way in the T-34, and that's why it was, and with constant updates on it, it remained one of the best, just like medium tanks of the war, right? The point I'm laboriously trying to get to is that the doctrine that led to very successful operations in the Second World War were based exactly on the doctrines that we see here. No, let me rephrase that. The mindset behind the doctrines were based are the same mindsets that would have existed in a fictional Black Force here, and that is the ability to push past, surround, encircle, and perform concentric attacks on an enemy such that you can destroy his main body. And once the enemy army is destroyed, then you can sort of you can imagine, once that army is destroyed, then all of these towns would have to surrender, right? And so this is really a question. This military operations question is really a judgment on how do you defend against a vigorous attack from someone like Blue. And I've heard quite a few answers now. A lot of them were about retreating to town A, town B, holding the bridges, etc., etc. But if we take into account these lines, and if we take into account the ability of our boys and girls to hold these redoubts, then I think it only makes sense that we do something like this. So let me move on to phase 2. Yes, I'm sorry I talked so long. But you know what? Like, you pay me to talk, so I don't know what your problem is. Right? Like, like, you want me to talk. That's why I'm talking. So let's say the artillery is here. The artillery is here. And the infantry are in this kind of in this kind of position. You might actually move one of these divisions over here, and then you might want to move one of these divisions sort of in the middle here to form a nice cohesive line, so that if there's any breakthrough, you do have some amount of backup, right? So like in this case, you would probably move this down here. And the reason is, like the main infantry force is to the south. So you're not going, like, even if this turns into foot infantry and tries to attack into your city, you just have much better, your rifles are better. Your rifles are dramatically better. And so, like, there's no reason why like, your rifles are not only better against their infantry, keep in mind, right? Like, your rifles are, no, let me rephrase that. Your rifles are already better than their infantry, and so why would you settle for anything less? Like, your rifles will be even better than their cavalry, right? And that's the idea, that the western face is not the main portion of the battle, and that's why you're allowed to sort of do something like this, where these two cities are merely screened, but most of your forces pointing towards the southeast, because you just know that these guys will swing around like this. Actually, let's just do it. These guys will swing around like this. Oops. We'll probably see this. We'll probably see this. Like, obviously these guys will be here by now, but these guys will also be here. So like they might take the city, they might take this little town, but they're not going to push towards the river, because it's like you can't, right? Like you just you can't they'll just run you down. Like sure you could form a square, absolutely, you could form a square with the horses in the middle, but there's so many of them. If you form a square, your square is going to be so slow in the middle of nowhere that they can just outrun you and hit the rear of these guys, right? Like, if you form a square here, if you form question, what is a square? A square is essentially something like this, where you have all of your rifles facing outwards like this, which means that you have rifles everywhere. You have a little bit of issue at the corners, but you can always bring in some reinforcements to shoot from the corners. But the idea is, once you have a square, cavalry cannot really break you, because the first row will put brace their bayonets against the ground, and so the horses, they're not going to want to run into these spears, for lack of a better word, right? So the horses will get frightened, and then you just shoot the riders, shoot the horses, and it comes down to a melee, sure, absolutely, but it robs, like, the most important part of cavalry is for them to be able to charge, and it robs the cavalry of the power of their charge by forming a square. But that supposes that they have to charge you, but they don't, right? Like, they can just go in this direction, and if your forces are here pressing an attack against the city, then they'll get caught in the rear. If they don't, if they try to form squares themselves, then they'll get cut off. Like, there's too many heavy cavalry here for that to really work, is the point. So these dragoons will sit in this sort of, by this town, and you'll stare at each other for a little bit. Excuse me. And so these guys will have marched here by now. We'll say that this lot moves in this moves over here. This lot moves like this. Like this. Perhaps we'll have this lot move like this. And so, you have one what am I trying to say? You have one rifle corps moving across each bridge, and then really that is all, right? Like, if they press their attack, let's do a third. Let's do a third layer. Let's do a third layer. So say so they're not going to attack through the city, because city fighting will just completely render all of their advantages moot. But if they try to breach in here like this, right? Just hypothetically, if there's an attack along these routes, perhaps here as well. Something like this. Let's keep these dragoons here. And then you do something like this, right? Like, you harass them on their flanks. and then you charge them from the front. And what are they going to do the minute they enter these little, what are these? Like, this is like two kilometers, right? This 2 kilometer little gap between the two cities. Like, that's not enough. The rifles from this age are absolutely able to fire at least a kilometer, right? Like the Dreiser gun that actually the Black Force has is, I think, what, like 950 meters accuracy. The blue gun is what, like 1.5 kilometers. Like it's a dramatic big difference, and this is just, they're not going to be able to fit in here. And in this case, you know, even if they find a place that is outside the effective range of your rifles, it is such a narrow attack corridor that there's so little frontage for you to have to worry about. And in this case, you know, like in this case, you have enough artillery, you have enough infantry then, because you don't need as much infantry here to blunt these attacks. That means you have a lot more infantry to blunt those attacks, right? I think that's self-explanatory. Let's see. Wait. Yes. Okay. So by phase 3, then we can say that let's say that red has this kind of frontage, and and black has sort of this kind of frontage. Like, they have captured this town, but they have definitely not done more than that. And you know, a rifle corps is basically equivalent to these 4 dragoon. What are these? This dragoon army, whatever you want to call it. Does that kind of make sense? Right? And so even if black were to attack, there's now a case for a heavy cavalry charge against this. Like, even though there is, you know, 3 divisions in the way, you could do a charge here. But even if you didn't, like, what's going to happen, right? Like, even if you didn't, like, the reinforcements are already across the road. You have your western bank basically ready. Like, you could theoretically move some of the cavalry back to prepare for a countercharge, just in case anything happens on this end, right? And that's all there is to it. Excellent, right? Excellent work. Well, I considered this a much easier one, just because when I built it, that is what I had in mind. I wanted it to be slightly easier. So yeah, I think it's nicer when it's easier like this sometimes, just because it's how do we say? The answers are less contentious when it's easier. Yes. I mean, that's why when I posed this question, and then I think it was on Wednesday when one of my boys gave his particular answer, and it was just like the most convoluted. Exactly, right? Yeah, no. Anyway, let's move on now to our squirrels. Yeah. Right. Okay, yeah, let's catch everyone up. So, what's happened in the meantime? Well, I'm sure most of you know this. But essentially, you know, there was a failed attack on this side, a failed counterattack by the technocracy on this side, and the counterattack to that counterattack vis-a-vis the 57th Division is now in play. It's been very much it's like the collective has recovered and they're now attacking in this direction. You will remember that technocracy originally pushed north and managed to gain a lot of territory this way. The counterattack has eaten away at it a little bit, but that doesn't mean that, you know, nothing is going to happen. Obviously something is going to happen. We're going to see. Let's see the 31st. There we go. Excellent. Come on. There we go. Excellent. Okay. But really, that's all that happened on this front. Oh wait, no. This has fallen. The 6th Corps. The 6th, of course, 6th Corps. It was just instantiated, and now it's all over the place. So this is here. This is gone. Go. Like we can see the sort of the amount of firepower that's now being concentrated in this area, right? Like between the 7th Guards, 10th, 12th Division, 5th is up here, and the 11th, which was actually just pushed across the London Wall line. There's a lot of formations here. That doesn't mean that they're all, you know, top quality formations, but it does certainly mean there's a lot of operating going on. Also, this line has moved in this direction. The 55th is now here, and it's attacking in this direction. There's nothing more that's going to come of that. There's one combat engineer regiment that's not being suppressed by the artillery, but that's not as much of an issue as it was in the past, because, you know, like the technocracy has learned much more about how to handle these combat engineering formations. Yeah. Oh, really? I thought I had talked about them. Okay, let me talk about it now. Combat engineers. They are essentially so there's squirrels that are riding, not riding, but they have, each of them has a trained rat that is carrying a. So the rat itself acts as both a weapons platform and mobility, and essentially the rat can carry a like a nice stout wooden board that acts as a flotation device. But it doesn't just act as a flotation device, it also acts as a shield against bullets, right? So the rifle bullets that the squirrels are using are blocked about 85 to 95% of the time by these wooden shields, or wood and like reinforced with iron sheets. And so what that means is that a squirrel riding a combat engineer riding a rat carrying this wooden shield is able to essentially mitigate a lot of the defensive weapons fire from the small arms, from the rifles of the technocracy. What it doesn't really mitigate against is the artillery shells that come down from the artillery formations that the technocracy has. And so exactly, you see where I'm going with this. Essentially, if there's artillery in the area, they're able to mitigate the issue with the combat engineers. If there isn't, then there is it requires a little bit more creativity. But as with anything, like the longer you're exposed to it, the more likely you understand that it's dangerous, right? I think that's fair. So that's what's going on here. Essentially, there's only one engineering corps, and that one has sort of stalled, or there are two. One has stalled, which means the other one is the only one that had been able to push forward, and yet like there's only so much that it can do. Does that make sense? Oops, did that wrong. There we go. Come back. There we go. 1, 2. There we go. The first guards, but of course that doesn't include the fact that a new formation has entered into this realm, so we're going to have a lot more rifles simply present here. So the 31st that is now sort of making its way up and counter-attacking in this direction will suddenly find that its services are probably going to be needed out west as well. Yes. And so until reinforcements arrive, really, that's the best it can do. We're yes. Well, and that's kind of the reason, right? Because a lot of these forces have been taken to be used against this counterattack in the east, which is now I talk so much, damn it. Which is now this breakthrough in the east, right? If we remember, the line actually started here before this latest offensive, and then the Second Army pushed through and then did a right hook as it attempted to get behind. And this oops, let's move the 15th down here. As it attempted to get behind basically all of the eastern front and attack it from behind, right? And so all of these things are happening. There's not a lot happening here, even though there should be. There is now. Essentially, like, if the 1st Pomeranian and the 2nd Corps are able to meet, then they'll have cut off an entire army group, collective army group, in the in what am I saying? In the east, right? And that is a lot of formations that the technocracy would then suddenly be surrounding. And we literally just talked about concentric attacks. This would be considered this is already a concentric attack in the north, right? You can see that the blue arrows are coming from all sides, and the red forces are really no longer able to hold on. And so unfortunately, that is what we have to do today, which is watch the red forces retreat. Oh, yes, well, it happens. Like it's better you retreat than lose your all of your forces to some ridiculous pride issue, right? I think that's fair. I think nobody wants. It's hard to justify uh, throwing an entire army group onto the pyre for your own like for your own pride. That's just not something that's done. And so the 6 guards now moves into this position. Let's see. The 6 guards moves into this position, and this is very important actually, right? Because now suddenly the the contact is reestablished between the Third Army and the First Army Group, or whatever this is. This is the Second Army. Yes, the Second Army of the First Army Group, and that's very good, right? Because for a while there, the Third Army was actually cut off from home, and they were afraid that they would never that they wouldn't make it back if they didn't take this Tower Bridge area. Thank you for reminding me of that, Blue. However, there comes a problem with giving up a long line, right? Because when you give up a long line like that, you're also making it more comfortable for your enemy to launch attacks against you. But if it means that you're in a much more easily defensible position, then yeah, I don't see why that shouldn't work, right? So again, let's pull this. This gets pulled. Oof. So we're gonna pull the front headquarters out. First Army headquarters are here. 56 Corps headquarters are here. 20th Division, 15th, 23rd. Excellent. Not that. This entire line is now different. This line is also different. Yes. So let's do this line first. The Minories line has become sort of one of the more important for the collective. Right this way, and this way. Okay. And then for the technocracy, yes, this time I'll remember the color. You don't have to worry. See, I just need to do that. Excellent. So even though these formations are still stuck here, they're much more able to move. That goes away. That goes away. I didn't actually need to move this that way. So the 9th comes down here, and it turns. And you saw originally the offensive from the northern side of this breakthrough. Right, like it was a very small corner, but it was essentially, how do we say? It was essentially the idea was if these combat engineers could reach the Aldgate line, then everything would be good. It would instead of the technocracy doing a concentric attack against the army of Eastern Front, it would become a concentric attack against Army Group North, against the 5th Army, which is sort of stuck very deep in the far east, right? But that's no longer the case, so unfortunately that is no longer something that can happen. So 10. I need a Army Group marker, which is here. So this marks the end of the first army group, and then the start of the third corps. There's going to be some reinforcements here. And am I missing anything? Yes. There is something that goes like this. Something that goes like this. Like that. The 66, not 66. Like this. Continue in this direction. Nothing happened over there. This is now completely gone. Oof. I need to work out where each of those are. Give me one quick second. So 5th Army, 7th Corps is 28 and 25. Yes. And this is actually, the 9th is actually an army group level thing. Oh, I should have deleted it. 1, 2. There. So this should actually be here, I guess. Well, they're facing completely different sides of the salient, right? Like the 5th army has the 15th Corps facing direct due east, with the 2nd Pomeranian in support, the 7th Corps facing due west with the 1st Pomeranian in sort of in a desperate attempt to get across here, and everything else is the 1st Army Group. Well, I mean 5th Army is technically 1st Army Group as well. So 2nd Army, 4th Army. Like the 4th Army is not really doing a lot except for trying desperately to defend this area, right? Yeah. Well, actually, yes, we will actually see that basically now. If you'll just give me one quick second to set it up. I think. Can we just double check that I'm not missing it? Like, I don't think I'm missing. No, I'm not missing anything. Good. Excellent. Okay. So, second part of this day. Will we go overtime today? Probably. Am I sad about it? Well, no. Actually, I shouldn't say that. I'm not sad about it. I'm not, because there's a lot of demand for this from both you lot and from our external viewers, so I can't even complain. Like, I like it. So let's continue. Right, so as we have said, we're going to need hello. Here we go. Icons. We're going to need an infantry division. 2 artillery regiments, and you guys are showing up, right? Oh, you're not showing up because you're in the wrong part. 1, 2, 3. Cut. Paste. 33. Excellent, and I'm going to need artillery here. Give me just 1 second, I named something wrong. Wait. 2 artillery regiments and I don't know what you're talking about. I'm sure I have no idea what you're talking about. I certainly don't sound like that when I'm concentrating. How dare you? I'm gonna sue you for libel. Oh, come. I hate that when I click into... When I click, like... See? Like that. It, like, into the empty space, and it still picks that thing. Maybe I need to make it completely transparent. But anyway, I think we're on 34 for this. No, we have 34. We have 6, 7, 5, 6, 7 on 38. So this is 38. This is 38. Excellent. And this should be 60. That's right. 60. 38. 6, 7. Oops. And then this is 8, 9. Oops. No, not like that. 8. How dare you? I'm just trying to think right here. How... How dare you? I'll challenge you to a duel to defend my honor. Don't worry, my honor. I know my honor is safe. So I'll have 9 and then 8. Go to the very bottom so I can actually click on other things. Excellent. The 9th and the 8th have arrived, and so the idea is if they can get in here and completely seal off this exit, then that makes this retreat a lot more difficult. Yeah, exactly. Like the idea is, if it's more difficult, then are they really going to do anything? Like, are they really going to are they really going to make it out? Do you want spoilers? Yeah. I mean, if you want spoilers, I'm fine with telling. Just like as long as the rest of the class is okay with spoilers. What about everyone else on Twitch and YouTube? If you don't speak now, you must forever hold your peace. Excellent, nobody's watching anyway. I'm completely okay with that. Because, okay, if you think about it, I have to take all of your money, and then can you imagine if I had to take everyone else's money as well? Like, that wouldn't be fair, right? Yeah, I might as well just take your money and be done with it. Yes, that's exactly the idea. That's exactly the idea. So these guys are attacking in this direction, blah 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 blah. The 31st is doing that. There's nothing interesting going on there. That is a good question. That is a good question. What will our friend Maplewood do with this? Oh my God. Thought on something. It's all good. What will my friend Maplewood do with his new artillery regiments? Well, probably a counterattack, given what we know of what the technocracies, what they think is they want to do. Yes. So this has disappeared. This has been given up just because it wasn't really worth keeping. No, I deleted the part. Quickly, quickly. There we go. That's good, that's good, this is good. These guys got chased back across. That's gone. One, two, three, four. So these guys got chased back across. And so now here's a question of what happens for the 5th army, right? Like, what can the 5th army do? Because the 15th is on the right, or the facing eastwards. The 7th is facing westwards as the inside part of this concentric attack. But what can the 15th do? Well, I'm glad you asked, because it can do this, right? Like, even though they had just finished, they had just finished it, the cavalry are already on the move, with some suppression help from the 5th artillery, and so the northern face is fairly stable with the 12th corps holding it. That means even though they don't really have a lot of forces, the 2nd Pomeranian can still punch through because there isn't a lot of force on the side of the collective either, right? So this is the 61st. Oh, we should put a line here. 5 and then red. So what can this 2nd Pomeranian really do? Well, a lot, actually. By if it's able to sort of break through into the rear, it can certainly nibble out the 5th Army headquarters, and that really does a number on everything else, right? And yeah. Let's see. The 15th was here. The 20th is pushed here. Oh, oops. One quick second, just checking an email. No big issue. A meeting got moved when I explicitly requested that it not be, but that's par for the course, right? That is my life. That's literally all of our lives, really, if you think about it. I mean, I don't. Yes, I know it was you that did it. You don't need to remind me. No, again, I don't really mind, but that is like it's a little bit of a dick move, right, bro? The 23rd. Oops. Wait, what? Why are the 6th and 7th up here? 5, 6, 7. They shouldn't be here. Now I think I'm going crazy. 38 is here as well. That's fine. So it's just a straight up copy. That's fine. The 23rd has now moved down here. Remember, it was up here. The 23rd has now moved into this position to support this defense because it was easier to just move it as quickly as it could, abandoning all of its heavy equipment that it couldn't carry to put it into the defense of the army not the army headquarters, the retreat route of the Eastern Front, right? So the 56th is still in there, the 50th is now over here, 9th, 6th, and the 300th combat engineers have really outdone themselves, but their job is now over. Well, over-ish. Because they did really like keep the 4th from driving too hard in and cutting off the rest, right? So no, actually, the question was, isn't the 56th Corps in danger? Well, no, right? Because the 20th is here and it's holding their retreat path. They just need to get there. Now, having said that, that's not necessarily easy, but it's certainly better than if they didn't have that retreat path, right? So, oops. This goes here. Oh, again. I delete too quickly. Something goes here. This goes here. This is deleted. These attacks are being pressed. But of course, this is a fairly easy to defend place, right? Because if you get into the Trinity Square Gardens, then you're just going to get sniped silly from the Four Seasons Center, Four Seasons Hotel. So oops. Don't. Well, don't get sniped silly is the word. The 4th is renewing its attack. 62nd has retreated to this place. Oh, I should delete this. Bad. My bad. So now it's cut in. It's technically not cut in, right? It's technically still. Let's remove this. The 52nd is technically part of the 4th Army. Still. Let's make that a little short. First, 53rd Army Corps. Let's move the 1st Army up to here, shall we? Just give ourselves some extra room. So that looks like that. That looks like that. Excellent. 56 as core still maintains that. Let's just redraw that. Are you sure you want me to answer that? You know my opinion on our boy Boris. I mean, I don't know if we talked about this. But yes, exactly. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. And so yeah, I don't have I don't have a public comment that I will make up afterwards. on the Discord, you can have my full opinion on what I think about this situation. Suffice it to say, yes. Basically, my friend whose name ends in AG has a correct. It's that kind of situation and that kind of feeling that I have. Okay, so this is done. Let's do the next layer. No. I like, certainly I wish them all the best. Both him and Rishi have, you know, a lot of illness to go through. But the fact that Boris had already almost died from it once really puts things into perspective, right? Not only is he double vaccinated or fully vaccinated, he's also had it once, and yet he still has it. And so, or yet he still got it, and we think it's from David, right? Like, so essentially, essentially the point is that just because you get vaccinated doesn't mean you can't get it, and doesn't mean you can't then pass it on. And that's the problem, right? So, excuse me. So let me just double check. The 23rd, the 35th, and 31st, and the 19th are now under the 52nd Corps, and the 52nd Corps has a remit to essentially hold this area at all costs. Let's add in the 20th as well. So the 20th is now also part of the 52nd Corps. And what this just means is it makes it easier to control this area, right, while the rest of them pull out. And so we'll have these guys essentially drop back to this area, or here. We'll have these guys drop back to this area. This is the First Army, 56th Corps, and then this is the 50th Corps, and then engineering formation here, pointing in that direction. So the retreat has been successful, which is good. But now the problem starts, right? Because now suddenly everyone has a massive amount of force, absolutely massive amount of force. And what are they going to do with it? It's not like they're just going to stick around and do nothing, right? And I just realized I'm going to be here all day. Oh my god. Essentially, the 8th Corps is now going to step it up. The 8th Corps is essentially going to do this. 1, 2, 3, 30th, 15th, 16th comes back as army support. This goes in this direction. The 10th Corps is essentially now, it's now here. 2, 3, 4, 5. Go away. The 20th remains in the north, but it's like it's a very, very shallow thing in the north. Let's just double check. This is where I want that front line to be. Oops. this is where I want that front to be. Like this. And the 7th Corps is moving in this direction. The 1st Pomeranian has actually moved itself in this direction. We'll come back to this in a moment. And between the 9th is here, 8th is here, and the 4th has resumed its actually all of it is now army reserve, right? Or army group reserve, actually, because it's an army group. He has an entire corps of 3 divisions as reserve. This goes away. The 2nd army is looking a little bit weird, right? It's got its 12th Corps in the north and the 1st Corps in the south, but that's fine. That's fairly agreeable. This is here. Oops. Then Goodman's Yard. Like that. 9th is here, the 8th is here. So the lines are now much more clean, and we can see that this entire bulge was cleaned up because of that very dangerous choke here that was about to get really, really difficult for our friend Thatcher to handle. Good call. We need one of these down here. We need one of these down here, actually, because we're going to have the 3rd, 4th in this direction, still doing that attack, but really not getting much done. And it doesn't really have to get anything done per se. It's just gotta threaten this, right? Because this salient is kind of dangerous in itself, and we can see the 4th army will try to pull it back as soon as it can. But now the problem is what to do for Thatcher, because there is no road across this until this far in the east. So and there are oh, come on, things going on in the west that will force him to respond as quickly as he can. The 1st Corps is sitting there. So earlier when I said that the 10th Corps would act as reserve, that's technically true, but only insofar as the reserve will be committed basically right away, because the 7th and the Pomeranians are on the move. Right, like the 2nd is moving in this direction. This is what the line now looks like. Oof. Getting hair in my eyes. Oops. Like that. The 1st Pomeranian had already moved into this direction. Let's borrow one of these guys. So as a corps, this will move towards the northwest. The 1st will move northeast. The 1st will move in the east. And the idea is to get to this point before Thatcher can. Because if they can, then that means they've blocked another crossing point, which means the next one is actually on this end. And that is hard. It's harsh. Yeah. And on top of that, there are not that many reinforcements for red on this area. So yes, for the collective, yes. The question was, couldn't they just jump off some trains? And the answer is yes. Yes, they technically could. It's not as easy as you might imagine, though. So now there's assault in this direction. And this is a lot of firepower for a single division, right? And so that's going to make it very, very difficult, especially with if the third has its own extra division in hand, because then it can do a lot of very interesting things by pushing more forces to the east. Yes, we're getting to that right now. Relax. Relax, relax. So these guys are moving up. Here. Excuse me. Oh, thank you. And they're going to be inserted sort of into this area, right? You have overwhelming firepower, and the 7th is going to be asked to move back a little bit towards this area, allow the 55th to overextend, and then there will be an attack towards the north. Yes. Let's see, that's the 4th Army. 4th Army itself has 2. 1st Army Group 1, 2. Yep. Raise 2 core, 2 core, 2 of those. And then this is 3, 2, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Yeah, we're good. Let's move on to the next part of the day, the last part. I like the clapping. I like the clapping. Oh, everybody's clapping now. Excellent. Yes, let's continue. Continue the clapping. Why aren't you clapping? Oops. 31st moves over here. The 38 inserts itself over there. The 2... That's not these 2 move over here. The 13th move in this direction. 7th falls back to here. 6th falls back to there. Two, 4. Oh, yes. I should move from this. Much better. And so this. So now there's this nice gap here that's sort of going to be exploited by the technocracy, and it's going to be one, and then 2, like this, right? So there's going to be a ton of interdiction against this assault. And then there's going to be an attack against the rear by essentially 2.5, maybe 2, enough soldiers for 2 divisions split across 3 divisions. And then the point is, what can this counterattack do? Well, it turns out a little bit more than we were expecting, which is good. Nothing's happening on this end. Let's move to the fun part. I love this part. So this is going in this direction. And the problem is, of course, that there's this area of the front was always weakly defended, right? Because the majority of the Eastern Front remained sort of in the south, and they escaped towards the south, which means that they are how do we say? They are on the wrong side of a natural barrier that makes it very, very difficult for them to actually get anything done. Right, so they are this is unfortunately going to be a rather difficult race for them, especially with nothing right in the rear here. Nothing in the rear here. This should be in this direction. And that looks as eccentric. And it technically it is, but the point is to actually head off any reinforcements that could stop the first Pomeranian from gaining this vital crossing, because once they have this crossing, then this is the next crossing, and that would spread, the eastern front too far, to eastern front too far. Yes, this is going in this direction, 50th Corps. But again, the problem is, right, like what is Thatcher going to do? What can he do? Right, like he can only order this rapid retreat eastwards, because that's where the enemy is going. There's going to be some more reinforcements in this direction, and there's going to be a change here because this has been pushed essentially all the way back to this area. Oops. The 12th is now here. The 2 artillery regiments are here. So not only is Thatcher sort of reeling from this, he's also having some troubles in this area, right? So the 52nd is getting pulled out, obviously. So this is where the this line is. The 8th is being pulled in this direction. 31st is here, 19th is down here. 32nd has moved in this direction. The 4th Army itself, well, the 4th Army doesn't, this is not an interesting place for the 4th Army to hold, right? So it is obviously just like on its way out as well. So the 20th is gone. But of course that means that this leaves a whole core of technocrats that are now open for further movement. Ooh, that doesn't look like this. Or like you can imagine that. You could imagine that even if they leave the 8th here, the 1st Corps can come up here to relieve the 15th, actually, right? If the 1st comes up here to relieve the 15th, then the 15th itself can slide to the right and follow along the 7th as it's sort of expanding in this direction, follow along the 10th as it's expanding in that direction. So the 2nd Army itself is now kind of nicely settled, and actually that's what we're going to do. The 10th is here. This is going here. Well, actually, no, that's not what we're going to do. Why would I do such a thing? I'm so silly. No. Instead, what's going to happen is the 1st is simply going to join the 5th Army, whereas the 15th will join the 2nd Army. So it'll look like this. 5th Army headquarters is sitting right here. Actually, let's put it right here. Let's Yeah, let's put it right here. Even though the 15th is now part of the Second Army, that doesn't mean that the Fifth Army headquarters can't remain sort of in the rear like that. Oh wait, that should be fine. Right, so the Second Army now has a contiguous front along this area. There are 3 Army Corps that are streaming into this eastern area for future combat. And we do feel kind of bad for Thatcher. But he tried, right? By Lizzie's name, he tried. And he did. And it was, like, he's still brilliant. It's just that his forces aren't quite as maneuverable as the technocrats, and that's a great shame. So next round, of course, the entire thing will be pulled out in this direction, and then the Fourth Army will probably have, enough forces, hopefully, fingers crossed, to deal with the inoffensive coming out of here, right? 16th is here, and it is attacking in this direction. How did I forget the attack move? Oof. Simply never enough. There we go. There we go. 5th Corps. 16th is now part of the 5th Corps. Excellent. So all of that was changed, I assume. Yes. Everything on this end was changed. Excellent. So we're only half an hour past our normally promised time. Oops. Well, that's alright. I hope everyone has enjoyed this little military Sunday kind of thing. Yeah. That's it for today. Let me move that. I'll move that too. Excellent. Good question. What's going to happen on this end? Well, the idea is, like, we've sort of talked about it at length already. Oops. We've sort of talked about it at length, and the idea is that for the technocracy and the collective, the most important points are now these railway crossings, right? Like, you certainly can have crossings elsewhere, but it's just not too reasonable. Which means that whoever controls the crossings really controls a lot of how the campaign is going, right? Would it make sense for the 7th to attack south? 7th Corps, you mean? Like right here? No. Because the collective main body is right there, right? Like you're not going to get anything done, and you're actually just slowing down the march of your line infantry eastwards to those crossing points. Like, think of them as bridges, right? Think of them as bridges. And so, like, yeah, you could theoretically cross everywhere else, but you would need to find the boats, you need to prepare. And by the time you're done preparing, the enemy knows exactly what you're doing. So that's why these crossing points are important. Well, okay, if say for example, if Thatcher doesn't get these crossing points, the next one is like here, or actually here, I think. And to reinforce the 5th Army is now going to become disproportionately difficult, right? Yeah, that's the problem. That's really the problem, because the Fifth Army is technically part of the Eastern Front, but it's nowhere near the Eastern Front. Yes. Yeah, basically that's the problem. Um, there we go. Oops. Yeah. You could imagine, like, so for example, this is the Second Army. The Third Army is getting kind of overextended, right? Like what could happen is the Second Army goes down to these three corps. This is two. We could probably create another army corps down here, and then we would generate a new army here. That would be the Western Front, and then and then we could generate a Northern Front that would take the Third and the Fifth, and sort of try to deal with it that way. Oh, I forgot. No, I didn't. No, we're good. Yeah, originally there was going to be a counterattack here, but that has stopped being viable. Especially with the 27th here. It is now in such a nice defensive position that the 23rd is very much like this is 1-to-1 basically all the way across the front. So there's not much offensive that can happen. So in do you mean in terms of supply? Yeah. No. I'm in no way saying that anyone is screwed here. It's just that suddenly we find that both the technocracy and the collective are able to fight a war of maneuver again. Right? Remember, this was the entire point of that breakthrough, is that my boy L wanted to fight a war of maneuver, and here he is able to do so, right? Being able to attempt in destroying the enemy's main body through this very, very interesting or very much more a war of movement as opposed to a static positional warfare. Does that make sense? Yes, exactly. Again, historical inspiration is historical inspiration, right? Like, if I were to call to cite any historical inspiration, it would be Moltke the Elder, who really fought this kind of war to this kind of like at this tech level with this kind of war, he fought it to perfection. Really. Yeah. It's difficult to really quantify that, but I would say so. Yes. Okay. Well, are we good? No more questions, I hope. Sure. Yeah. That's actually a good question. The First Army. You mean the collective, right? Like essentially this guy? Yeah, right now the First Army has two Army Corps, the 50th and the 56th. The Fourth Army, like technically, what am I saying? Technically, the Eastern Front has three armies: the 5th, the 1st, and the 4th. The 4th has 52nd, 58th. The 1st has 50th and 56th. Of course, there were a whole bunch of reshuffles in the middle, but this is where they've ended up, and we'll see that. Oh wait, no, this should be like this. My bad. The 19th has essentially just been given to the 58th, so it's a very fair, like 3-3, and then responsibility-wise, it's also fair. But we'll see that change, because we'll see that these two need to move urgently to the southeast, and that happens to be the 52nd coming in to sort of do that. But also, it could very well be that the 52nd as a whole gets, gets rochaded to this point and attacks south, depending on where the technocratic formations are by then, right? Yes, fundamentally, that's the point, that even the Third Army, even though it's not part of this rush eastwards, will want to fight a war of maneuver, because it itself had managed something grand, right? Like, it itself had managed to come all the way to, I guess, Dock Street, and then Vaughan Way, and then it was sort of the the target of a vicious counterattack, and barely survived. But now it's sort of recovered and is now trying to find its own way again. Yes, basically. Good, okay. Well, that's it for today then. Thank you very much for watching. In conclusion, boys and girls, please remember to not use Chrome. Please use Firefox. And we shall talk to you tomorrow, where we will continue our Scarlet Nexus game. Yes, that's right. Okay, good night now. Bye.